It's Phil Collins this morning, and Sususu, I can never say it, Susudio. I think that's right. All right, here we go. It's that time of the week.
It's time now for the latest news on what's hot and what's not in the world of technology with Mathew Dickerson on Tech Talk. Here on TCFM 88.9.
Morning, Matt. How are you?
I think Phil Collins does very well for a man with a bad stutter, doesn't he?
Yes, he does indeed, and I've got a worse stutter. Actually, I had a stutter as a kid.
Did you really?
Funny about that. Yep. Up till I was about 7, and it suddenly went.
Yeah, when you decided you wanted a career in radio.
Well, actually, I used to play radio stations and TV stations when I was young like that. Yeah, I suppose so. But I always wanted to do this, and my parents could never understand why. However, here we are. We spoke about this on Monday, mate. Coronavirus, Australia, 2 million downloads now, plus, and that's on Apple and Android, so it looks as though it's going quite well. But we need a lot more. 2 on 25 million is not enough yet, though, is it?
No, that's about 8%, and obviously the target is 40%. I still think the government's dreaming at 40%. Singapore got 20%. Other countries around the world haven't been able to get close to 20%. So 40% would be fantastic and would absolutely deliver what the government needs in terms of having a large percentage of the population being able to be tracked in terms of that contact. But I just think they're dreaming. So 8% after a couple of days, that's great. Maybe they'll get to 10, 15% this week, but it'll soon tail off. And anything like this new with technology, I mean, it's that classic bell curve. You'll get that first group that'll go very quickly, but then it quickly tails off and you'll get a much longer delay before people get to the point where the masses are downloading it. And keep in mind that the most susceptible age range, as we mentioned on Monday, is that older group, and a lot of those don't have either access to a smartphone or the will or inclination to go and jump onto a brand new app that's just come out.
Yeah, indeed. I did notice in letters to the editor in the Sydney Morning Herald yesterday, one bloke said, I'll download as long as you open the pubs again.
That sounds like a pretty good compromise to me.
Yeah. Hey, ScoMo, open the pubs and I'll download. I thought it was quite good. Samsung's new Galaxy Watch. I tell you what, I want one of these. Tell us about it.
Yeah. I can remember years ago, Richard, when I walked into a sporting goods store and I bought a watch that had a heart rate meter on it, and you had to have the old band around your chest. And I said, it's a bit of a pain when you go out for a bike ride and you put the chest band on, etc. And the salesperson told me with great confidence that they would never, ever have some sort of device, a watch, whatever, that didn't have the need for a chest band to monitor your heart rate. And of course, that looks silly now because there are watches out there with that. But the new Galaxy Watch, it's coming out with an even better feature. And this is something that, in terms of health apps, there's a whole range of things trying to be developed here. But this is going to monitor blood pressure just from a watch on your wrist. And we all know the process going through for blood pressure, and it's fairly complicated. And you think, well, how's it going to do that? Is the watch going to blow up on your arm and then restrict your blood flow and then decompress again? But no, it's actually got a little cuff that you have to get with it, and you put the cuff on and it does what a normal cuff would do in terms of expanding and restricting blood flow, and then it calibrates itself to what's happening with your watch and what it's monitoring in your wrist so that the calibration can work out what your blood pressure is. Now, I must give a warning here to all your listeners, Richard. Please don't replace your doctor with your watch. It is something that's an add-on, and the idea is to be able to monitor things and look for changes. You've got to go every 4 weeks and recalibrate it with the cuff again. But I think the main thing here is just keeping an eye out for things that are happening, changes that are happening in your body, just monitoring things so that if something does look not right as such, then you go for a quick visit to the doctor and make sure that everything is right. And that's what all these health apps and watches are trying to do, is just get us to keep an eye on our health, get us to keep an eye on our heart rate, our BMI, our blood pressure, all sorts of things so that we can go to real professionals and get it sorted out if we need to.
Yeah, indeed. I just think it'd be very, very good to see this watch being used by doctors themselves, because every time you see a story about a doctor on television, they're always taking someone's blood pressure. How boring is that particular thing? It's like in the movies, everybody can find a parking spot very easily. Anyway, you notice that? Facebook released a gaming app for Android, and it's to do with the pandemic, and it's an app. It allows you to watch other people playing video games. I'm thinking, oh, yeah.
Doesn't that sound incredibly boring? But it's a huge industry. It's huge. So what this Facebook app is doing is allowing you to be part of the whole streaming gaming movement out there. And there's a famous YouTuber. He usually sits at number 1 or number 2 in the world for subscribers, a guy called PewDiePie, or his channel's called PewDiePie. And he has, at last count that I saw, haven't looked at it for a while, for somewhere in the vicinity of 20, 30 million subscribers to his channel. And he started off his channel just by sitting there playing a game, a bit of commentary as he played the game. He did that for a couple of hours a day and built up this huge base of, as I say, tens of millions of people actually watching. So there's a whole range of gaming, streaming apps out there, and Facebook thought they better jump on the bandwagon. So they were basically getting ready for this, and they've been working on it for a while, and it was meant to be launched around mid-June. But obviously with the pandemic and lots of people at home streaming, lots of people at home gaming, then they brought that forward. So they've now got the ability through an app that's part of the Facebook ecosystem to essentially allow people to watch other people playing and also to be able to participate in some of those games themselves. But watching people play is a huge industry. Don't make any mistake about that. This is a huge industry and something where there are people who are making millions of dollars by being watched while they play.
Yep, it's staggering. Now, I can't believe this. Wi-Fi 6E. You better tell us about that, and you better explain it to the lady in Orange who was saying that 5G was wrecking her plants, and it turned out there's no 5G in Orange. But anyway, that's another story. Well, I couldn't believe that yesterday.
So in Wi-Fi, the common frequencies we've got at the moment are both 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz. Now, that's where some people get confused. 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi is not 5G mobile phone signals. 5G in mobile stands for 5th generation. 5G in Wi-Fi stands for 5 gigahertz. So the standard now, just to confuse things even further, the current standard or the latest standard what we're up to in Wi-Fi is Wi-Fi 6. And so you'll see modern phones, for example, come out with Wi-Fi 6. If you went to buy a router at the moment, you'd ask the salesperson for a Wi-Fi 6 router because that's the latest standard. Wi-Fi 6E has just been ratified. Now, 6E is just a little bit better than Wi-Fi 6 in that it's the same standard as Wi-Fi 6, but it actually uses the 6 gigahertz frequency range. And what you do as you go up the frequency range in terms of either be Wi-Fi or mobile phone signals is typically, and there are other variables, but typically the higher the frequency, the better the data throughput, but the less the distance will go. So 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi is good to get maybe around your entire house, whereas 5 gigahertz might only get around a couple of rooms from where the router might be. So you might put the router near the lounge room where you're going to be streaming some of your TV things, near the office maybe. Down in the bedroom, it doesn't matter so much. The kids, when they go to bed, hopefully they're not sitting there on their computer watching TV all night or on their iPad watching TV all night. So the 6 gigahertz frequency range will probably be even less than that. So it might be good for around one large room or around maybe just one large office. Again, throughput even faster, but distance even less. So keep an eye out for that. That's just been ratified. You won't see devices coming out with the 6E standard. Probably, I would suggest maybe the end of the year, maybe a little bit earlier, but probably sometime in the next few months.
Okay, that'll be interesting to see. And finally, I can't believe this. I really can't believe infrared reflecting paint that can cool buildings even when you have a black roof.
Yeah.
Now, the penchant these days is for grey roofs, which absorb a lot of heat. And now you've got this infrared reflecting paint. How does it work?
It's basically
does it work?
Well, in experiments, in tests they're doing in the laboratory, absolutely it works. And it's actually a two-part process where they put a first coating on, which is like a polymer or like a Teflon, and that effectively is where the heat reflection occurs, and then there's a colour that goes over the top. So let's call it a paint, but effectively it's a two-part process, a chemical process. And the idea is obviously that we can focus a lot on trying to keep our houses cool with air conditioning. You're using more electricity. You've got to get that electricity from somewhere. But the approach here is how can we keep our electricity usage down and not anything to do with running more efficient air conditioning by actually having the outside surface be reflective. And I can see at the moment things like roof houses going where you'll have the point where all that surface area that's being hit by the sun having that reflect heat. But with offices as well, with office buildings, I can see that this can be something there where you'll reduce the entire heat of the overall building. Now, you've got to be aware of the fact that whatever you're reflecting heat, it's going somewhere else. So it might mean if you go and coat your office building with this sort of paint, then next door might be a little bit hotter. So that's something to be aware of. Whereas with houses, you've got houses spread out enough that I don't think the reflection from that roof would be enough to actually impact people next door. But again, what I love about this sort of thing is you've got people developing a whole range of solutions in different ways. Someone says, let's use less electricity. Then some people, not logically, would try and say, how do we make air conditioning more efficient? The approach here is, let's reflect more of that heat so we don't get as much heat in the house or office in the first place, so we don't need to cool it as much. And a great innovation, a great approach to reducing our overall usage of fossil fuels.
Have they got any idea of how much it reduces heat on a roof? Any how much cooler it makes a house inside or an office inside? Any
Yeah,
data on that?
so you've got some of the data there that shows up to 60% reduction in heat. And again, there's a lot of variables there, how much sun's hitting it, the angle of the building, all the rest of it. But 60% reflection of that sun, that heat that comes from the sun, can be affected by the first tests they've been doing. So it's a pretty effective mechanism to reduce that heat.
It might reduce the heat. What about winter?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. You want some of that heating there. And again, I've seen clever architects when they design buildings, they design them such that the angle of the sun, the great thing we have is the sun's angle changes, obviously, from winter to summer. The angle of the sun might get to the point where you're letting sun in via, say, windows, for example, and in summer that's being blocked out by the shading of the house. So in office buildings, a bit harder to do that. But again, I can see where you'd have some approach where you might have it blocked and then exposed, depending whether it be winter or summer. Who knows? Yeah. The next innovation, Richard, might be that you can turn it off and on. So you can turn it on during summer, reduce the heat, turn it off during winter to keep the heat coming in.
Yeah, turn your roof off. Yeah, go out and turn the roof off, kids. Matt, always good talking with you. We'll catch up with you next Wednesday morning on Tech Talk. Have a great day.
Thanks, Richard. Good to see you again.
Okay, then, bye-bye now. Mathew Dickerson.